is going to be hard to post. My story was sadly defined by the saddest day of my life. It kind of defines everything I do now. Let's start with a short backstory. In February of 2003, I was born to two happily married people, and they gave me everything they could. Growing up, I was definitely a daddy's girl. My dad and I did everything together. There's so many stories, I could spend 40 minutes telling them. My dad was my hero. But all heroes have enemies. My dad's was cancer. His first surgery happened before I was born, so personally it didn't really affect me. They actually found out he had cancer the same week they found out they were pregnant with me. So I can't imagine how hard that must have been for them. I never realized my dad was sick till I was 5. That's when he relapsed. I really only remember 2 events from that period of my life. And the first is that my dad and my mom missed my kindergarten roundup because they're at the hospital. And the second is that my dad was in bed a lot. But that was my normal. Sickness and sleeping and doctor, that was my normal. After that surgery, my dad was given 4 years to live. But I didn't know that. So I lived the next 5 years of my life like nothing had changed. But my dad made sure that we went on adventures and sometimes we fought, but we made some of the best memories of my life. And looking back, I can see why that was so important to him. Why those memories were going to be so important to me. And everything was fine. To me, at least. I lived in this beautiful bliss of a world where cancer didn't exist and my dad was fine, and he went to my dances and we did daddy-daughter dances and he made promises. Then in 5th grade, I had just moved to a new school, and one day my mom and dad sat me down and they told me that my dad relapsed again. That was the first time I ever had to ask myself if my dad was gonna die. Now, there were so many people there for us when my dad got that prognosis. And he had a surgery and he ended up being fine. And I lived another 6 months with my dad in this bliss, this naive sense of safety. And I went right back to never questioning the fact that my dad was actually sick. But the last 2 weeks happened. It started like this, and this is how I remember it, and it may not be completely accurate, but I remember one night my dad asking me to play cards. And I said no for some unknown reason. I think I had homework. And my dad played cards a lot, so it wasn't even significant to me. It was just a benign question. And I said no. And the next day, I went over to a friend's house. We were playing and hanging out, and we had a sleepover. The next day, at around 11 o'clock, my grandma picked me up. I remember thinking, why is my grandma here and not my mom or my dad? So I got in the car and I asked my grandma, I was like, why are you here? And she told me that my mom had to take my dad to the hospital because he couldn't breathe well. And I didn't think much of it. Doctors were normal, hospital visits were normal. My dad having to go get checked out because he didn't feel good was normal. And the next day, my mom came home and told me my dad had blood clots in his lungs. And I was told it was a routine surgery and he was going to be fine, and he was supposed to be. That night, or a few nights later, I remember asking if I could go see him. There was something in me wanted to see him. And they kept saying no. And in their defense, they had no clue that what was gonna happen happened. While my dad was in the hospital, after his surgery for blood clots, he contracted pneumonia. Pneumonia is really hard for cancer patients because their body is already so destroyed by chemo, their immune system, that pneumonia is almost a life sentence. But I didn't know that. The night they found that out, my dad was in ventilators because he couldn't breathe by himself anymore. And I didn't know that. And I kept asking to go see him, and everyone else kept saying no because he was supposed to be fine. Then on October 20th, at 1:35 in the morning on a Monday, my dad took his last breath. On his death certificate, it doesn't mention cancer. He technically died from cardiac arrest, which basically means that his body, his heart, couldn't keep fighting anymore. The next week went by like a blur. I remember that Monday morning, I got up and I got dressed for school, and I remember I was wearing fuzzy cheetah pajamas and a polo shirt because I have a uniform at my school. And I walked out of my room, and as I got to the kitchen, the pastor walked in and he asked me to sit on the couch, and my sisters got up and they sat on the couch too. Bella was only 2. And I remember my mom couldn't even speak. My grandma looked at me and she just your dad passed away last night. I never knew that that was a possibility. Despite living with a dad who had cancer for 12 years, that was never a possibility in my mind. I went into shock. I remember that day, people went in and out of our house saying their regrets and their sorries, and I just sat on the couch reading a book. I was reading one of the Twilight books, and I remember people kept coming up to me and talking to me, and I acted like nothing had happened because I couldn't process it, that my hero was gone. That week, I did not cry a lot. I was in a state of acceptance, but also denial, because I accepted the fact that my dad was dead, but I denied the fact that I wasn't going to see him again, at least on this earth. I remember a couple days after that Monday, I think it was like a Wednesday, my mom taking me to the flower shop to pick out the flowers for my dad's funeral. I remember my dad's funeral was on a Thursday or a Friday, and 1,000 at least people came to my dad's funeral because he was such an amazing man. After my dad died, I heard so many stories of the amazing things he did. And for a long time, I chose to pity myself and just to be sad, and I learned and I began to understand that mourning my whole life is not what my dad would have wanted. He would have wanted his little girl to learn to be strong. So that's what I'm doing. Rather than let my dad's death destroy me, make me sad and cry every day, I don't. Even though I'm crying now. I choose to be strong and aspire to be the person he was, because he was amazing. My dad's death could have been a bad thing. And I'm not saying that I'm happy about it, but I chose to make it a positive thing. My dad's death changed the way I look at everything. And that's why I started telling my story here, because it changes every day of my life. It changes how I interact with people, how I choose to spend my time, because I know now that anything can happen. That time is limited, that you don't want to be able to forget anything. But most of all, my dad taught me to be strong. Because despite my dad being so sick for 12 years of my life, he kept working hard to provide for us, to love us, to make time for us. Even when he had migraines, because half of his brain, left side of his brain was gone, he was strong. And not only was he strong, my mom was strong. And after my dad's death, I learned he wasn't the only hero in my life. I had a legion of heroes that were here for me, that loved me, that helped me get through the worst part of my life. I guess the point of this video is to show that even though life sucks and that horrible things can happen, if you choose to find the positive in that, to choose to find what you gained, you'll learn to accept what you lost. And every day of my life, I will remember my dad, and I will love him, and it will never change. But because of him, I've learned so much.